They arrive in silence and darkness. They descend from the skies and have a hunger for human flesh. They are parasites. Upon infecting their victims, they can take upon many forms: winged creatures, monsters with blades for hands, but most disguise themselves behind the mask of the human hosts they control. And thus, no one knows who is a parasite and who isn't. Fear of knowing you might be eaten by the person standing next to you infects everyone's mind. This is the case for all except for Shinichi Izumi, an ordinary high school student who gets his right hand turned into the home of a parasite after its invasion of his brain goes wrong, giving him the ability to sense and be sensed by parasites, but only an arm's worth of their fighting strength. Battling for control of his own body and against the parasites who threaten humanity, it is up to Shinichi to try and maintain the fragile balance of the world after humans are faced with a species stronger than them in nearly every way imaginable. Parasyte has always been one of my favorite anime since I first watched it many years ago. It has one of the greatest protagonist character development arcs I've seen to this day through Shinichi. It has action scenes between such fast and lethal opponents that you find yourself holding your breath and only releasing it once the battle leaves at least one mangled corpse. It has tearjerker moments that make you question humanity itself, and an incredibly iconic OST to top it all off. However, something I noticed most of all through my numerous rewatches of Parasyte over the years is that I discover something new every time. Maybe just a small detail, an important line I forgot, or even just the look in a character's eye, but I always manage to peel back another layer of this complex investigation into the human species that masquerades itself as a simple horror story. And after 4 rewatches of this beautiful anime, I decided that it was finally time to read the manga as well. Because if I was already finding new, minute details with every rewatch, I figured there must be a trove of details that were lost in translation when converting from the manga. The details that Iwaki Hitoshi drew so many decades ago that have gone forgotten. And the first thing I found particularly interesting about Parasyte specifically, before I even began delving into the manga chapters themselves, is its 2 different names. The name of the original manga, and the name of the anime. The original manga of Parasyte, first published in 1989, is simply called kiseijuu, or Parasite. But actually there's a layer of depth in the name itself that goes unseen to anyone unfamiliar with Japanese and the kanji characters they use. The actual word for parasite in Japanese is kiseijuu, a small difference in pronunciation, yes, but a huge difference in meaning. This last character in the word for parasite, pronounced mushi on its own, is the character in Japanese for insects and minute life forms pertaining to bacteria and parasites. But instead of using the normal character in the title of his manga, Hitoshi Iwaki replaced this last kanji with kemono or shishi, or in its English translation, a beast. And the name of the anime adds something too. Its title is Parasyte the Maxim. Now, a maxim is a short, broad statement expressing a general truth, a proverb, the kind of pithy statement that philosophers of yore oh so loved to indulge in. And it is important to note that rarely, if ever, do anime change the name of the manga when adapting it, especially if the translation is just one word and as simple as parasite. Even if they wanted to honor the change in kanji character in the anime title as well, the maxim is clearly unrelated to that purpose. It's extraneous. And so its addition to the title invites a key question. Why is it there? In my eyes, it stands to reason that the need to add the maxim to the anime title was so important in representing the ideas that Parasyte dives into that the production company was willing to completely alter the meaning of the title for the sake of the maxim's inclusion. And I believe I'm right in this assumption. Because while the original name of the manga is only a little bit more than a play on words, kiseijuu versus kiseijuu, a minute life form versus a brutish beast, Parasyte the Maxim introduces a new idea entirely in just its 3-word title. A maxim is a fundamental principle, a fact, but one that, up to this point, had to have been created by humans. A fabricated truth of the universe which is only founded on what humans believe, what we can comprehend. And no, I don't mean to question ancient philosophy or established facts of the world, because Parasyte the Maxim already does it in my stead. Behind the gore, the shape-shifting, the horror of it all, Parasyte exposes humanity's faults. The moral standards and so-called laws we have set as a race to justify ourselves, and how quickly those same truths fall apart once we are threatened. When faced with a true maxim and parasites come to Earth to impose that onto humans, we see how humanity's maxims are filled with hypocrisy in the face of undeniable fear. To sum up all of that philosophical jargon that I just said, Parasyte pulls off an incredibly difficult task and does it subtly. Underneath the surface of this classic horror story, it manages to make murderous, emotionless aliens feel like the good guys compared to humans, our own race. This strange contradiction is what I will investigate today in this video, in what I have described as the beauty behind the madness. Now in this video, I will continue on the assumption that you have already seen Parasyte or have at least an idea of what it's about. And though I don't think there will be significant spoilers, as this is more of a broad discussion of the series' themes and message, I won't be going out of my way to necessarily avoid them. Now let's get into it. I thought there would be a trove of details in the manga that the anime missed, and I immediately realized that I wasn't wrong. See, the anime opens by saying a single line, "Someone on Earth had a passing thought," before proceeding to see this poor woman get brutally decapitated by her parasitic husband. The show very quickly leans into the horror aspect, reels in its watchers with the gore and the shock factor. But the manga's very first pages have an entirely different feeling to them than the beginning of the anime. See, that first line that was in the anime was only the first of many that were supposed to preface the decapitation scene in the manga. The real chapter goes like this. Above Earth, someone was thinking, if half of mankind disappeared, how many forests would be saved? If 99% of mankind disappeared, would pollution be reduced by 99%? Someone was thinking, if we protected life. It has a completely new meaning. The manga makes two things clear from the beginning: that humanity is a plague to Earth itself, and the implication that there exists a higher power in this story that decides to send the parasites to punish them for it. In the first 2 pages, it establishes the maxim that the anime felt was integral to its title, that maxim being that life must be protected, something we see very often repeated throughout the anime and the manga. These are the first lines of Parasyte, almost as if to say that no matter where the story might go, how the characters might change, it all comes back to this idea that started it all. And the irony of it is that the only real hindrance to protecting life is the human race. It suggests that perhaps kiseijuu, the parasitic beast, does not refer to the small life forms that arrive on Earth, but actually the dangerous hosts they inhabit, humans. Iwaki Hitoshi says, with only the title of this manga and its first 2 pages, that we are the real parasites of the world. These new parasites invade humans and eat us to survive, yes, but we're no different. We as a species inhabit Earth and continue to harm it as we deprive it of its nutrients and natural resources. And not only does the manga say this, but it also argues that we're even worse. Because unlike the parasites who strictly eat humans, we harm and take advantage of every species. Humans have a history of hunting, domesticating, and breeding just about every animal to exist. So who are we to play the victim when we, as humans, have done far worse than the parasites and continue to do so? But of course, this isn't a history lesson, and neither is Parasyte. Talking about the bad humans have done isn't very interesting or worth telling at all. Every human on this planet is well aware of the harm we've done, and the animals we eat, that alone is not worth making a fictional story about. And as such, Parasyte reveals this hypocrisy of humankind not by saying what we've done, going into the history of it all, but by showing how people willfully ignore those horrors we ourselves have done as a species. Parasyte is a horror manga through and through. But what is so scary about Parasyte is not at all the gore or the killing, in my opinion. The real horror is just how truthfully it exposes the side of humanity we are afraid to admit exists. Let me explain. Parasites, in a way, act as a voice of reason in this manga. Yes, it's true. They are unfamiliar with societal customs. They don't understand why humans act the way they do. So, in a way, they are this unbiased party who can see human morals for what they are. Contradictory. Parasites are killing humans, yes, but Migi mentions how humans have killed each other a lot more than parasites have. War, serial killers who murder not even to feed, but just for their own satisfaction. Migi's right. When the bullies in the park are throwing rocks at a cat, Shinji screams out how living animals are not our toys and that they feel pain. But as another parasite mentions, humans kill cows and pigs and don't feel remorse or fear. But when it comes to their own kind, the parasites are framed as devils in our midst for doing the same. It just so happens that we are their cows and pigs. So where do we draw the line? When is killing humans okay? When is hunting animals okay? And when is it not? See, this is part of the madness. There is no answer, if you thought I could give you one. Humanity has grown so large and made so many exceptions that you can never be completely good or bad with what you do. You pick sides. You eat meat or you don't. You cast a vote for a mayor who wants to preserve the environment, indirectly advocate for the good of the planet, or you don't. You think that parasites are just trying to coexist, eat in hiding to make sure they aren't hunted by humans just like every other species on Earth, or you don't. And even though I can't answer this on my own, I think that Parasyte actually does try to draw this line and make it clear what humans think is acceptable, what meets their standards. And it almost always stems from the presence of human emotion. The most important theme in the anime stayed true in the manga when I read it, or the other way around, I guess. That theme being the importance of human emotion. Starting with Migi, in nearly every encounter with parasites, their lack of emotion is almost always a topic of discussion. Migi wanting to use the students as a meat shield against Mr. A. Tamiya using her baby as a living experiment. Even more so than being able to turn into a living weapon, what feels the most inhumane about parasites, what Shinichi takes the most offense to, is that they are everything a human is, the appearance, the speech, but they have none of the emotion. And this is why Shinichi's character arc is so much more heartbreaking, as he slowly turns into what scares him. And the manga often uses Shinichi's eyes, what are generally known as the window into the soul, as a vehicle to show this gradual loss of feeling, his parasitification, if you will. In many of Shinichi's most heartfelt moments of inner turmoil, the look in his eyes is emphasized. The first tear he sheds after his mother dies, when he sees Hideo Shimada's massacre in the school and the countless bodies of his former classmates. There is a reason why the window into the soul, into the heart of Shinichi, always becomes a point of attention in this manga's most important moments. It's because, once again, instead of really focusing on the gore and horror of this story, what is paramount in those scenes is understanding how it makes Shinichi feel. Shinichi is the perfect middleman of this story, as he's the only person who can try and understand both sides, humans and parasites. He is bothered by Parasite's lack of emotion because he internally knows that having emotions, feeling sad, crying, are the only things that still keep him on the precipice of being human. And the manga and anime most accurately pinpoint this single trait that divides human from the emotionless parasites as altruism. Altruism is the belief in or practice of disinterested and selfless concern for the well-being of others. The manga describes it as the opposite of selfishness. And there is essentially an entire chapter in the manga where Tamiya listens in on a professor lecturing about altruism before she meets Shinichi. It only makes sense that the one parasite who genuinely shows a semblance of interest in becoming human, or at least melding with their society to the best of her abilities, is attending a lecture on altruism, a trait that humans hold very dearly. Just look at Murano's shock at Shinichi throwing the dead dog in the trash can, or Shinichi's classmates' fear after seeing him calm down in only 10 seconds after witnessing dozens of their friends' corpses. Being troubled for the sake of others is what Migi even describes as what it means to be human. But the professor in that lecture notes that it's a practice that isn't exclusive to us. Many animals protect their offsprings or frequently sacrifice themselves to ensure the survival of a group. Bees sacrifice their lives to defend their nests, despite being incapable of what humans describe as thought. Most life forms exhibit altruism in one way or another. And to contrast this, something that is made clear repeatedly throughout the story is that the parasite's paramount priority is self-preservation, the true opposite of altruism, that they don't have a shred of care inside them for others. This class lecture in Parasyte is particularly noteworthy because it is one of the few topics that does suggest that humans are justified in this story, the opposite of Parasyte's larger theme that I mentioned earlier. It's difficult to argue for altruism as a bad trait to have, and if it is the one thing separating us from the parasites, doesn't that make us morally right? Well, not quite. Because once again, behind the debates between Migi and Shinichi, his emotionless moments that shock us and make us believe he's losing his humanity, there lies a simple truth that refers back to what I was saying about humanity's willful ignorance. That they internally disregard the altruism that parasites do in fact exhibit to maintain their image as villains and parasitic beasts. We must once again consider the parasite's overall purpose for being on Earth. It's suggested that they were sent from a higher power to protect life. They came to Earth to defend it from human harm. A parasite ran for governor in the story and was elected by humans on his platform to preserve the environment. A parasite was able to resemble a human so well that people voted for him. He easily garnered their trust in the ideas and feelings he expressed. With no doubt, if he suggested the same ideas in monster form, no one would trust him. He wouldn't be voted in. But it's ironic that Shinichi always claims they have no emotion, but he has no way of disputing or correcting them. They are right. No matter how much we want to call them aliens or emotionless, this demonstrates that human thoughts like altruism are not exclusive to our species. To claim altruism as a distinctly human trait is arrogant. Parasites want to preserve the world. Tamiya shows care for her child before her death. Migi sacrifices himself for Shinichi. It just so happens that because they eat humans, any good they might do is considered irrelevant. They evidently want to coexist with humans by hiding how they eat us and even disguising their appearances to fit our standards. But Shinichi finds the idea of coexistence repulsive. Yet, humans coexist with pigs and cows and eat them. It's the same. But humans try so hard to refuse that fact. My favorite line from the ending of Parasyte goes something like this. First, one species must understand that it cannot fully comprehend another. It's incredible how pretentious man can be to think it has power over every living being. By the end of the story, it could be said that both sides end up winning in some way. Humans can live out their lives without worrying about being eaten, and parasites are able to coexist with humans. And at the end, with Migi's disappearance, almost like it was all a dream, and Parasite's integration in society and disappearance, in a way, it essentially ends exactly where the story began. But a lot happens. Parasites giving birth to human children, serial killers ordering the police to kill dozens of innocent people, parasites running for mayor, the madness of a fearful society. And despite it all, the monsters that devour flesh and can massacre dozens of humans in a mere second, who we should instinctively be scared of, are the ones we end up supporting. Humans and the reader themselves learn a valuable lesson that we have no right to impose our maxims and laws, our moral upstanding as the quote-unquote most altruistic beings to exist on Earth and its other inhabitants. And to be able to create such a complex theme amidst an incredibly entertaining, suspenseful, emotional, and horrific story is beautiful. And that is the beauty behind the madness of Parasyte the Maxim. As always, this has been the Anime Culture Corner. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for future in-depth show, manga, and character analyses.